The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general, informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you very much for joining me this week. I am, this week, have invited Reverend Dr. Ken Garrett to my show. Now, Ken is based out of Portland, Oregon, and he and a guest that I had on a few months ago, Ashlyn Hilliard, have put together and are sort of organizing or set up or running or operating a community support system or group for ex-cult members. And that's as much as description as I want to give just as a little summary here. We're going to talk about this today, and we're going to talk about Ken's personal story as well, because he got into the cult world in a very interesting way. And so, Ken, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much. Good to be here, Chris.
Yeah, it has really been my pleasure to meet you and interact with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really something. You and Ashlyn put together the Portland conference that I went out and spoke at. A lot of people did, and
yes,
you guys were the organizers. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how long have you and Ashlyn been working together?
Oh, let's see. Ashlyn and I have been working together for just about 4 years. She joined us, I guess it was right before COVID. Everything is measured by COVID now, but it was sometime around there. We met in a conference from the International Cultic Studies Association in Manchester, England. And then, went to a couple other conferences, and she was looking to move somewhere and thought that Portland would be a good fit for her and Ryan, and which it is. And so she moved to Portland, and then we immediately welcomed her into the work we're doing with SAFE. Right.
And what exactly is SAFE? SAFE. It's something you guys have put together and are running. What is it?
Yeah, it's the Spiritual Abuse Forum for Education. And admittedly, it sounded like such a good acronym when my wife made it up in 2017. It was like, you're going to do that. That is it. So there's a little bit more than just a forum for education, but that's what it stands for. And what it is, it's a very informal group, and it's not even a fixed group, but it's an informal meetup for survivors from all cults of all different ideologies and whatnot. Every other month we get together at a nice location, a big brew pub kind of complex, and we always have a little bit of instruction or talking time. Actually, less and less of that as the group gets more into talking themselves. And then we have a lot of discussion of various experiences and common experiences between cult survivors. And the main purpose, really, we only have two purposes. It's to disseminate some valid, vetted information about cults. And of course, we're always speaking somewhat generally. People from a specific cult have some fine-tuning in their understanding of their experience. But we share the general stuff about thought reform and those issues. And we are really seeking to provide a social, emotional, social environment of safety and affirmation for everybody. And that's really just as strong a part as the information, maybe even more so, since Ashlyn's had the same training as you, some formal education in this. I have written extensively about it in a doctoral program dealing with Christian abuse, not the other kinds. And Kent Bertner, who's also a partner of ours, he has a lot of experience as a cult interventionist for decades. He's a retired priest. So there's a lot of experience there, but we realize that a lot of what we say in an attempt to educate are really things you could find online, but you can't find friends, face to face, just talking. So that's what our meetups are for. And then in the off month, we'll meet at a pizza place or something for a happy hour and try not to talk totally about cults, but we usually end up talking about cults. But just to give everybody a chance to kind of, unwind and just be normal with each other.
Nice. Where did the idea come from to do this?
Okay, I am a cult survivor. I left it was a Christian religious cult, pretty gnarly kind of place, and I left it in 1996, and didn't really get into cultic studies or anything. I went right back to school in theology and just started pursuing that, but along the way, as a prosecution, as a case developed against our old cult leader for sexual crimes against children, okay? So it's pretty big stuff. And as that was developing, I was in the middle of studying for a doctorate in another area, and things were resolved in that court case with his victims, which were seven ladies in their 20s, and things were resolved criminally and legally to where I thought about changing the subject of my dissertation to basically cultic churches or spiritual abuse, right? So I checked with all the victims and I said, well, what would you think if I, wrote about this, not about you specifically and not even about what happened with you, although that would come up, but how would you just feel if I talked about that and studied along those lines? Because I have to write to do it. And they all felt it was totally cool. So I was able to move ahead with that. That involved joining the International Cultic Studies Association, because I found that the understanding of abuse in Christian churches, it's getting a little bit better, but it was really far behind the current research in that area. Spiritual abuse itself was seen mainly as a spiritual problem that the victim should resolve, and nothing was ever brought into the discussion with the Christian religion about the sociological studies that have gone on and all the research. So I had to get away from that a little bit in my studies, into the ISCA world, to submit myself to the more secular academic side of things. So in that context, I started thinking, all right, what am I going to do with this? And, how could I help people? And I thought, I assumed that it would only be through the Christian religion, since that was where I came from. That was where my abuse was at. That's probably what I know most about. So I started talking with my wife back in 2015 or 16 about putting together a maybe 8 or 16 week small group dealing with this issue. And I thought, okay, I'll just do it for, a short-term thing to just share this information, and we'll see where it goes. But then it just kind of, I knew I didn't have the energy to pour into an every week meetup or meeting with a locked group of people.
Sure.
And also there's probably something about me that I just don't like closed groups. I like seeing all kinds of people coming through the door, and the church I pastor's in the middle of downtown Portland, so I'm just totally immersed in a very multicultural kind of setting. And so I was very uncomfortable with the idea of starting a small group that would be closed, and I was warned by some experts that I needed to meet with people before I invite into the group to make sure they're not spies, and things like that are certainly valid in some situations, but not something I was going to do. So what it came out of is I started thinking to myself, what did I need when I walked out the door of my cult? I was not ready for any therapy. And I've had very little therapy, actually. I couldn't afford it anyway. I wasn't even ready to call it a cult for years. Mm-hmm. In Christianity, it's often thought that if you have a fairly orthodox doctrinal stance, you can't be a cult. And that is the hook. Mm-hmm. It's very, it's still common to, you're talking to Christians coming out of an abusive group. I never mention the cult word because they usually aren't even ready to consider it, but their response when it does come up is, well, it couldn't be a cult. We believed in the full divinity of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And that was a classic understanding of the word through the 70s, and it's a little slow shedding that. So anyway, I just asked myself, what would I personally like if I wasn't trying to be a pastor and I wasn't trying to put together a curriculum and be successful at that and all that? What would I want if I was a new cult, survivor? What did I want when I walked out the door? And I know what I wanted. I wanted to be in a room with people who could understand my experience enough to show me empathy and kindness, without me having to share all of the big wham-doozle stories about it. But I wanted to be understood. And I desperately needed to understand that there were some very real malignant social things going on that are common to these groups. In other words, I needed to understand that I wasn't alone or isolated in my experience.
Right.
So that's what led me to put together this group with Sharon, and then in a few years later with Ashlyn and Kent. That's what led us to putting together this group, which is, unapologetically open all the time. Every meeting has the core group that's always coming, but there's always new people in and out. Feeling comfortable with people walking in and out the door, and everybody can grab a beer and they can even have their pizza while we're talking. It is not a serious therapeutic meeting.
Right.
And that's what I would have wanted. I would have wanted to sit across the table from somebody with a beer and a slice of pizza and just talk and be looked at as a likable, or at least a reasonable person. And so we tailored it that way. And the first meeting we had it was in the basement of my church, and it lasted about 2 hours. And I think I talked for 2 hours. I had so much to say.
Yes,
I didn't even get through all of Lifton's 8 principles. I just had so much. And it was very well attended, and so and by people, I guess it was mostly Christian survivors, because I hadn't even reached out out of that world. But it was very well attended, and people were excited about it. And I realized they weren't excited because of my verbosity of talking so long, or me. They were excited because there was simply nothing like it happening. Right. And they were buzzed. And So that started me thinking about, first of all, asking the question, why, if it's that sparse in Portland to get help for this thing, how can I, with a good conscience, limit myself to just Christian survivors? That's not really too cool. That's not helping people. It's just kind of keeping it in my camp. And so even though I'm not at all an expert or well-versed with most of these other groups that join us, there's some universal things of caring and compassion that, it doesn't matter what you believe if you really have those things.
That's right.
So we started envisioning something that was different, and we took it outside the church. In Portland, people are not freaked out by churches because nobody grew up going to church. It's not like other parts of the country where they might not ever want to go in a church. Here, like, we have different groups meet, and the Scientology survivors, who have a great group that meets at the basement of my church, they love going up and walking around in the sanctuary. It's fine. So that's not why we moved.
I'll tell you from personal experience, I certainly enjoyed it while I was out there.
You did that? Yeah. Okay.
It's a great church. And I walked around in it just like, this is so traditional, typical, classic, old school German 1870s church. And it was just such a wonderful experience to walk around in it and feel all this history in this building. So I can relate. Yeah.
I'm glad you did. I remember now that you did. And I think there's just something validating about being in a very a religious experience that certainly predates your own former group.
Yep.
And that brings a bit of gravitas, or at least legitimizing or something, to be around a group that's lasted for that long, I guess.
Yep.
I don't know. Anyway, we moved out of the church because it doesn't have wheelchair access. Parking's a hassle, and good grief, we could get this community room at the pub for a nonprofit rate. So we moved out to McMenamin's Kennedy School, and we meet in what was an old classroom. You saw those rooms, Chris. And we meet there, and we opened it up for all survivors of spiritual abuse. And that's why we didn't choose a spiritual or a Christian name or something.
Right.
And I went on Facebook, and I created a Facebook page, and I just sent it out to people that I knew. And then I paid, you know how you can pay $10 and reach 14 billion people.
Yeah, exactly. You boosted your ads on Facebook. Yes.
Yes. So I did that. And by the end of the week, I had 200 people.
Wow.
And for me, that's a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not in the internet world. So, I had 200 people. And by the end of the month, I had about 600.
Wow.
And so there was a tremendous amount of identification going on, because we certainly don't have 600 people showing up.
Right.
And so that built a base of communication and people knowing what was going on. And supporting it, not financially. We've never really been in that position, but just kind of keeping an eye on us. So we started up with our meetups, and every meeting that lasts for about an hour and a half. Afterwards, people hang around and go down to the bar, and usually my wife Sharon, she'll go down there and hang out longer. I'm usually toasted, so I'm just kind of loading the car and heading for home. So we've been doing that now for years, and that's how it all evolved. Now, how people from, white supremacy, fundamentalist polygamy, LDS groups, Scientology, lots of New Age group survivors, yoga cults, which are big around here.
Oh, I'll bet they are.
Oh, yeah. Bad bad stuff.
Yeah.
And a few other little weird ones. A few like singular cults of just a family who is recruited by one lady or one guy that ends up ruining everything.
Yep.
So, and these people found out about us on Facebook, and we went for it. And it was a tough choice for me, Chris, because like most pastors, I like to think I know everything there is to know about everything, and that I probably ought to talk about it every week for as long as I want. We do tend to be a little bellicose, and it's just who we are. So I had a choice to make there about being willing to not be an expert in just about anything we ever talk about. And we really, I would say, as we've gone along now, less than half of the people are even Christians anymore. I mean, are still practicing Christians. Mm. And that's cool, because I love the people. I mean, I don't really care what their religion was or is. But so things really evolved, and my role became more of a just facilitating good discussion and leading basic instructional times about this issue. But I sure haven't become an expert in anything at all. But that's kind of how it evolved for me. And excellent. Why I'm here to this day doing it. Yeah.
Excellent. One thing that I love about this is the fact that, and what you just described, which is the first time I'm hearing the whole origin story of this. I knew some of that, but not all of it. And the reason why I am excited about this as a topic, wanted to talk with you and Ashlyn about it, is because what you just described is something that anyone can do in any town, USA. Anybody could do this. They could set up a Facebook page, whatever, and they could just go to town, right? Is this a model? If we were going to put this, it's a simple thing, and yet it's a thing. It's not nothing. I like to point out that just talking or leading a group and having, as you mentioned earlier, I think there's probably a little bit more going on here, where you mentioned having vetted information and leading a talk. So there's some structure to this. It's not just meeting and, hey, what's up? Tell me about your cult experience. There's a little bit more going on.
Yes. Yeah.
How would you describe what that little bit more is?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you catching me on that, because that's really relevant. As with any group that's successful with a planned spontaneity, it takes a lot of planning.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of planning, and if you have a group of people coming in, different people all of the time, there does need to be a very, very high sensitivity to the emotional health of the people coming in.
Yep.
Everybody has to play nice and be really cool. And so there is planning about those things and a sensitivity to it. What's most important to us, I think, is that the new people coming in, there's always new people. And it's so easy when you have a group that has been successful, and you've all sat around and had pizza and beers together, and you're just, really getting to be good buddies. It's so easy then to start closing off.
Yep.
Which, guess what, man? My cult was closed off. There was no extra place set at the table for that new person who, so that is an important part of the structure. And we've learned about that by really enforcing the rule that nobody is forced to share, and nobody has to even share their name. And if somebody's sitting there at their chair and their hands are down holding the seat of the chair and their knuckles are white, as they're sitting through this meeting, I had to learn that is not a bad thing, and it does not mean that I'm doing something wrong.
Yep.
The most loving thing I can do in that environment is perhaps to just give a smile to somebody, and as they leave, say, "I'm really glad you came tonight."
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. Not
see you next time, or can I get your email, or anything of the sort. So that's something we're pretty, we try to really protect the anonymity of people in the group so that it's their choice and they just blossom. I mean, when people are feeling respected and loved, good grief, it's what I needed, and they just need their time to do it.
That's right.
And then there's loyalty and friendship, and it's great. But you can't produce that and package it and then throw it at somebody when they walk through the door.
Yep, that's right.
So that's some of the planning that's important to us. And another thing that I don't know if it's probably okay to say we insist on it, but it's something that when Ashlyn and Sharon and Kent and I powwow about this stuff, we have a term or a phrase we use: can this person take care of the room? And what that means is, can this, if we're having somebody speak or visit, which we occasionally do, or like in a conference setting where there's a lot of people coming, our biggest concern is not, is this person smart? Are they published? Have they been on TV or something like that? Our biggest concern is, can they take care of the room? Can they pivot, slow down, make emotional connection, have a sense of humor, and be kind to people? Can they take care of a room full of people? Right. And 99% of the challenge of that is just simply being a person who wants to do that. Mm-hmm. If you want to do that, you'll do it. So that's some of the underlying structural parts of our meetups that are very, very important to us. We definitely don't want people to come to a meetup and hear, even if it's correct, hear hateful speech or angry speech or stoking the fires of, yeah, you should hate. We don't want to get up there and preach peace and love because people are hurting, but we don't want to hurt people more. Right. So it's very important to us that we create that kind of environment, because we also know that we're not licensed therapists. I mean, so we're not playing therapists. We refer to therapists, but we want to stay in our lane, and our lane is giving the basic information over and over about cult dynamics, and then doing our best to genuinely make an emotional connection and respect, kindness with people. And that's the underlying frame of what we're doing.
Well, it's ideal because here's the thing about cult recovery that I've learned, or that I feel is true over the years that I've been doing it myself and working with other people about it, is it's the opposite of what cults do. If you want to help people recover from a cult, you treat them the opposite of how they were treated in the cult. The cult dictates behavior.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah.
Because that's what you're describing. Respect, care, kindness, compassion. You can be silent. I'm not going to force you to do anything in this space. Yeah. You can just sit here. I'm not even going to suggest that you speak up if you do not want to, right? You're here. Yeah. That's all I want. I'm happy you're here.
Yes.
That's it, right? And cults are always about agenda. It's always about the underlying, there's always subtext. There's always some hidden thing going on, and they're always trying to lead you somewhere. And one of the things that I absolutely love about you specifically and what you're doing with this program is, as a pastor, you are not leading people to your congregation. There's no end goal in sight of you're not recovered until fill in the blank, right? That you're putting there. None of that is part of this. And and that is at once the easiest way to do it and the hardest way to do it, I imagine. Because the temptation to want to put an agenda there or direct people or interfere with people might be strong in the moment. And people can make mistakes in those moments where somebody's visibly not comfortable or not happy or something. You want to, what's going on? What can I do? How do I help you? Instead of just let them be. And let's just see what happens. You know, they're here. They're making the reach. They'll decide if they want to come back. And if they do, they'll decide on what terms. That's the opposite of the cult experience, right? In every way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think. I never have felt that this would be some sort of a recruitment tool for me,
right?
Or for my church, because I am a survivor. I've been recruited. I am a survivor, and I would never. Yeah, that's not fair. It's taking advantage, and it's not fair. So it's not as much a temptation for me. I think if I had started this 20 years earlier, it would be a great temptation. Yeah. I would have, been more, you know how you are. I would have wanted some trophies.
Go and go. And
my life was so mixed up, and then I met Pastor Ken, and oh my goodness, But no. Now the good day for me is just knowing that I'm loved by somebody who doesn't share my beliefs, but sees me as, a person worthy to get a cup of coffee with and have lunch, and really, that's a beautiful thing. That's fine with me.
Exactly. We're just getting along in the world. And that's, if there is anything that I think of as the good work that churches can do in our world, it's literally that. It's creating community where it doesn't exist. And and I if that's what churches were about, and that's all that was going on there, man, it would be nothing but 100% support from me, because that's your brand of doing this is what appeals to me about religion, because it's where religion flourishes and really shines as an organized activity that really is helping people, in this case, overcome spiritual abuse. And that is a thing. That's a term. It's a recognized problem. You can look it up. There's religious trauma, there's spiritual abuse or trauma. These are terms that are recognized in trauma circles. And yet you're obviously and loudly, we're not therapy.
Right.
You don't have to have a therapist on site. You don't have to even think in that direction. That's not what's going on with what you guys are doing.
Right.
And yet you get therapeutic style results in some cases, not because you're pushing for it, but it just happens, I'm sure. And regardless of that, you're just helping people get in touch. And one of the most powerful things, tell me if you agree with me, I think one of the most powerful things about the ex-cult experience is learning and realizing you're not alone, that other people have experienced the exact same things you did. It wasn't your special brand of stupidity that landed you in this cult. You were taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I read a writer in an essay about cults describing the recruitment into a cult as being somewhat like having a natural disaster descend on you. Yeah. And it's like this. we're 80 miles from the coast, so from the beach, right? So let's just say one day I get in the car and drive to the beach for the day. I'm going to just goof around on the beach. That's the day the big one hits. Tsunami, and maybe I took my wife and we were together and suddenly we're, geez, hope we live, right? And we make it up to a hill and everything. We lose everything. It's not my fault.
Right.
That the big one hit. Somebody could come along and say, well, why did you go down to Cannon Beach on that day?
Right.
And all kinds of questions. Didn't you know you were in a tsunami zone? I mean, all kinds of sharpshooting, questions could occur, but really, I was a normal guy who does what a lot of people here do. I went to the beach for the day. That's how cultic recruitment happens. Yeah. You come in contact with a recruiter who's usually, really the success rate of recruitment really depends on the skill of the recruiter. I mean, some of these people are really good. Yeah. And you are caught in a web, in a storm, and sometimes you're thick into it before you even realize what has happened.
That's right.
So it's really a beautiful thing to be able to be in a room, like you were when you were up here at our conference, Chris, and you presented, and then you were in the panel and everything. To be in a room with people from different backgrounds and to pass them in the hallway and know, all right, that guy was in an ashram for 5 years and his life was totally screwed up, but he's absolutely connecting with what I'm saying.
Yep.
So that's a beautiful part, I think, is the ability to find that commonality with everybody pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about this is now we've really got it documented and sort of figured out and broken down for people now as to what the anatomy of this is. It's not complicated. It's pretty simple to understand, but there are things about it that are unique and that make a cult a cult. And once you understand that and sort of the anatomy of coercive control, it all just starts lining up very quickly. But until you get it and frame it that way, it's a chaotic confusion. It's just this mass of bad decisions and bad conversations and second guessing yourself and third guessing yourself and financial ripoffs and attitude adjustments and people who are, and there's all this anger and emotion and it's this big ball of mess and you're like, what the hell just happened to me? I don't, what is this? What happened to my life? And it's that's a great analogy with the natural phenomena, a storm or something hitting you. It's like that. You're like, you struggle to find, how did this happen to me?
Yeah. What did you do to make that happen, Chris?
I didn't invite this into my life. What is this? Nobody asked for the house fire or the tornado. It just appears. And other people will judge you. It is wild. Even with a tornado, they will judge you, right? Why'd you build your house there? Why'd you move there? You're always like, dude, I was just living my life. And this thing came along and it just annihilated my life, and now I got to get it back on track. And so this education, this providing a forum for education and some guidance of, well, look, here's how to frame some things, right? Here's how to think about this. Like, there's coercive control and there's these 8 points and there's influence and here's how it works. And there's things that people respond to and they go, oh, wow, I didn't even know. Yeah, nobody knows. That's how they get you, know?
Yeah. I think it's why we cult survivors from all backgrounds, we end up completing each other's sentences.
Yeah, that's right.
When somebody says, well, he told me one day, why can't I just get an extra credit card? And I did. And we're going, oh, we know.
Yeah, we know where this is going. Yeah, exactly.
May I finish your story for you?
Yeah, and then you got another one. And then let me guess, there was another one. And then, did he ask you, is this the one where he asked you to take the mortgage out on your house? Is that this one? Yeah, exactly. Now, actually, let's go ahead and talk about your background for a second. Because you've stated a couple of times now you were involved in a cult. There was a leader. There was sexual abuse. What was this group you were part of?
Okay, yeah. It was called Southeast Bible Church.
That sounds nefarious.
Changed its name, which these groups tend to do.
Yeah.
But while I was in it, it was in 1984. My wife and I, we were newly married, and I had just got out of the military, and I was transitioning back into civilian life, and I was a paramedic. So I got out and got a job as a paramedic here in Multnomah County. And both my wife and I were Christians, although we had very different backgrounds. Sharon was the daughter of a Baptist pastor, and she's just cool as all get out. But she really didn't grow up quite like me. She didn't have posters of Bob Marley and Ted Nugent on her wall, and little difference there.
Yeah.
So, but I was a Christian, and I also had a lot of aspirations about wanting to continue on in some form of Christian ministry, either that or go ahead in medicine farther. And I was very impacted by the Jesus movement that had happened really before my time. I was born in 1960, so I wasn't exactly of that age, but I was exposed to it, and I really was excited about wanting to be in some sort of setting like that. I thought communes were cool.
This is definitely a child of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I know. I just thought that would be so cool, and with everybody loving each other and all of that. So one day at work, it was really soon after we were back in Portland. I was getting off my shift, and another paramedic came in to sign in, and she saw that I put a Bible in my pack or something, and she said, "Oh, are you a Christian?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, that's cool. So am I," and blah blah blah. And she said, "So do you go to church or anything?" And I said, "No, Sharon and I were just kind of looking around and trying to figure it out. We're looking for a church, And to a Christian cultist, that statement is like honey.
Yeah, the spotlight. Here it is.
We're looking for a church. It's like, oh my goodness, could this door be open any wider?
Yeah.
So she said, "Well, what are you looking for in a church?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for some discipleship, training more in my faith and everything." And this is how I know either God or the devil were speaking at that moment in my life. I said, "We're also maybe looking for a small group that maybe even meets in a home." Ka-ching!
Oh boy.
She practically, it's like I'd have to pick her up off the floor. She's one of my dearest friends now. She left, and I tease her all the time about recruiting me into a cult. And I mean, everybody leaves these crappy groups. So.
Yep.
Anyway, so we ended up back at that church, and we visited it, and we immediately were hit with challenges. Get time off work to come to church, study the Bible, do this. We meet on Wednesday. We meet on Monday morning. We meet on Sunday.
Wow.
We share the gospel door to door. We're serious. And I am just weeks out of the military, where I was a paramedic, a paratrooper medic, and then I was a dust-off medic in California. So I was into very intense experiences, and I really did not have a healthy, really immature, but I didn't have a healthy way of thinking about risky behavior and not needing to always compete to be the best and all of that. So when this church presents itself,
in other words, you were an average male in your 20s.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. I was just getting to where I could blame myself for joining a cult.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I got to watch that. I appreciate that. So there I am. I took it hook, line, and sinker, and then for the next 12 years, our marriage unraveled. We had our kids. We had 3 kids. We stayed married, but you know what these groups do to marriages. They remove all intimacy to where you have secrets from your wife and she has secrets from you, and you don't want her to know what you're thinking because she might rat you out. And it's just so terrible, you know.
Yes.
And that happened to us. And then my path involved diving back into the world of drugs and all of that stuff.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I dabbled with all of that stuff when I was a kid. But then I went a little more full on with it in my early 30s. I was self-medicating because I was in a cult. And my cult
so it wasn't the cult giving you the drugs. It was a sort of a trauma response to the whole thing.
It was both, because it was a trauma response, but my cult was not, it was not the kind of fundamentalistic Little House on the Prairie group like you might think. We were a little violent. And a couple people died. I mean, one of a drug overdose and another of a suicide.
Oh, my goodness.
And this is a group of about 50 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And,
I wasn't aware of that side of this.
Yeah. And probably a number of us were into the hard drugs, including the pastor.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like anybody was ever putting their arm around Kenny to say, "Hey, son, you know, let's talk about getting you straightened up." You know,
yeah, right.
It was just a free for all, and so I was really screwed up, and so of course my marriage was in the dumps, and we were living communally in these large, you know, very expensive houses on a mountaintop around Portland here. And we would rent it and then have, you know, 15 people live in it. So, and we were doing that ostensibly for more spiritual training. And the truth of the matter is we were a really freakishly academic church in terms of theology, learning Greek, learning Hebrew, and just religious behavior can really fit in with a lot of unhealthy lifestyles.
Really?
Yeah, it really can.
That.
Right on.
So do I have it right in thinking that you guys were really intense into the cult leader's interpretation of ancient scripture and dogma and going back to the original sources and learning the languages and this kind of thing for that purpose of was it like an intricate belief system?
It really wasn't a belief system different from most any run-of-the-mill church you would find today.
Okay.
It really wasn't. And in fact, it's studying those original languages, they did not, to my knowledge, they never resulted in an aberrant or avant-garde theology or anything of the sort.
Okay. It didn't radically change your understanding of the scriptures, in other words, to go back to that.
No, the purpose of that was, you know, underneath it all, probably to keep everybody busy.
Right.
But yeah, but in our group, every man, it was kind of expected that you were progressing to be a pastor or a teacher.
Okay.
And in order to be a good pastor teacher, you need the languages and you need to, you know, work on that. So,
okay.
Strange as it was, that's kind of where it was. Because remember, I got into it wanting to maybe pursue, you know, vocational ministry.
Yeah.
Well, that dream kind of died. And by the time I was in my middle 30s, really for a time before that, I was pretty disenchanted with the group.
Yeah.
And I was beginning that secret thing that you get going on when you're ready to leave, when you're getting ready to leave. And I'm wondering if my wife's going to come with me. I'm wondering if I should stay until my children are of an age that I can protect them. I was not aware of the things that were happening in our group in terms of children. And I'm going through all of this stuff. And then basically, I kind of got it together in terms of the drugs, cut all that off. Got comfortable with a private secret life inside of me that I didn't discuss with anybody. And I started plotting and making my escape. And I sensed that my wife was kind of getting there too. And she was. We just couldn't say that to each other because in a group like this, oh my goodness, you're afraid something will show on your face that you've been thinking of leaving and you'll get busted. So we were really scared. But for the last few months before we left, we were on the same sheet of music and we took the clothes on our back and got in our car and drove away in 1996.
Wow.
Yeah. And the allegations about the molestation of our pastor, as soon as our daughters told us about what was going on, it was a few months after we were out. You see, when a kid goes through that.
So your children are how many daughters and sons?
I have 3 daughters.
3 daughters. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Of varying ages, all while you were in this cult.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Now, our youngest daughter, we left when she was like 18 months or so.
Okay.
But the older girls, they had experienced this, and they, as children will do in these groups, they weren't going to say anything to anybody out of fear of what would happen.
Yep.
So they waited till we were out for a few months and would not talk to us about it until they really felt like we weren't going to go back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's total evil, right?
Oh, yeah, I get it. How old were they at this point?
11 and 12.
Oh, man. And and the unspoken thing, they were sexually assaulted in some fashion?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
By our pastor. Yeah. Thank you.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I've got a hair in my eye. I'm not crying. I should be, but I'm not. But
Understood.
Thank you. Yeah.
Understood.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. It was a tremendous thing for our family. So we called the police.
Yep.
And the police did an investigation, and this was 1997. Mm-hmm. They did an investigation which today would immediately shut the whole thing down and have a guy in the clink. And I mean, but at the time it was, well, we don't know if they're lying or not. And then other girls would also support it. Well, we don't know if they're just mad because his family's a disgruntled former church member trying to hurt the pastor. Right. So we went through all of that, and it was turned down as a case.
Oh, the prosecutor wouldn't even pursue it.
No, because the DA wasn't absolutely sure that he'd win. Right. And they only take cases.
Yeah, that's what we run into with these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of let it go and just really hunkered down to try to get through adolescence. And I went back to school, and I just kind of figured, geez, my kids got screwed on this, because, you raise your kids to go to the police, right? When something bad happens, and then they do that, and you do that, and you're driving down to the police saying, okay, girls, it's going to be hard, but this is the right thing to do. And then they get a door slammed on them.
Yeah.
So imagine how that helped them get through adolescence and respect for authority.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I tell you, justice is few and far between for ex-cult members. It's just a fact of life. It's why we do this exposure, is we're trying to, as former members of all of these groups, we are still working so hard to get law enforcement to catch up, on this stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And so we just all lived with it until about 2014. And of course, by this time, the church had fallen apart. About half of the people stayed. And we all had relationships with each other. We all kind of landed in different places, emotionally, but we all were kind of still friends and all that. Okay. And the girls, of course, were friends with their girlfriend, the girls they grew up with. And they all kept in contact with each other.
So you maintain ties with the former cult members, or with the other people who were still in the cult?
No, not with people in the cult.
Okay, but people who had been in the cult.
Right.
Okay. I just want to be clear on a
couple months after. Let me clarify it. After Sharon and I left in August, I was a significant enough member that our departure was, it rocked things a little bit.
Right.
And everything fell apart in October, and about half the church left.
Oh, so it's not too long after you left.
Right.
Got it. And when that happened, or during that time, another question I have for you is, did they come after you at all?
I don't think so. Okay. A couple of weird things happened. Someone came and destroyed all of the sunflowers and corn and stuff growing in my yard, which was just a little weird, Yeah. And then somebody also called in a report that I was growing pot, which I wasn't. Right. And so the police did a big knock and talk thing. And so there were different embarrassing things. And of course I was maligned by them, but I could really care less. It was like, thank you, Right. Yeah. So okay. They started sucking in, because even though that pastor had dodged a bullet and he was interviewed, even though he dodged a bullet, nothing gets a narcissist's attention like a knock on the door by somebody with a badge.
That's right.
I mean, no playing around now. Yep. So that scared them. They changed their name. They pulled into themselves. They didn't actively try to recruit people into their group, and they just really tried to lay low, because I think the whole cult operated to keep him out of prison myself.
Of course.
So by the time 2014 came, and the girls were older now, young ladies, and they one day, about 4 or 5 of them got together and talked to a real high-speed attorney, a great guy, a great prosecutor. And he couldn't take their case, and we probably couldn't have afforded it anyway, but he had this idea. He said, I'll walk down there with you. And he said, why don't we go to the police station and file a new report? And they said, can we do that? And he said, yeah, maybe some information's changed. Maybe you've talked to each other. You remember things better. And it's significant. Let's just go check it out. So they went and actually filed a new report that made it to the desk of a sexual crimes detective, a woman. And whole new game from 1997. Now, it's a female detective, a female judge, a female assistant district attorney. Now it is women who are empathetic toward the girls, interested and aghast that nothing had happened in 1996. And they ran with it. And he was convicted and sent with a 20-year prison sentence in 2015. Nice. He beat it a few times with appeals that sent it down to the lower court, but always a losing endeavor for him. And now he's finishing out his sentence at the Oregon pen.
Nice.
So that's kind of our story about, how we left, and the group continues on to this day.
Even with him in jail. Wow.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. He's running it from jail.
Same as NXIVM. I mean, these guys don't necessarily quit. Did you know there's a guy in Texas in jail in, I think, Tennessee right now, who has officially changed his name to L. Ron Hubbard, Ronald Lafayette Hubbard, Ronald Hubbard, and presents himself to former Scientologists as L. Ron Hubbard reincarnated.
Oh.
And people send him money. In jail.
That's what I was going to ask you. How successful is he with that?
Yeah, he's been in jail for 3 years for some pretty serious charges, drug-related and violent-related. And he's running this whole Scientology 2.0 thing out of jail.
My goodness.
Yeah, you really can't make this stuff up. It's just one of those things where you think knocking out the figurehead, the thing will just sort of dissipate, right? Like the Avengers,
right.
They'll just kind of disappear. But it doesn't work like that. People hold on to their beliefs, and they hold on to the dogma of it, and new leaders arise, or the lieutenants close ranks and stay loyal to the guy even when they're in jail. It's bizarre that it happens, but it's common enough to comment on it.
Yeah. That's so true.
Yeah.
These guys that stayed, now this group that I was in, they haven't grown at all with people. Mm-hmm. A couple people have joined, but they're still really small, 25, 26 people.
Yeah. It's a hard recruit. It's a hard recruit interview when your leader is in jail.
Yeah.
That is a tough sell.
Yeah.
that is true. There'll be the diehard loyalists, but bringing new people on is a little hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And the people that are left in it, Chris, we were good friends. I mean, we were tight. We were hunting buddies, and we'd fish together and hang out and go to concerts or whatever. I mean, it wasn't like in our group. A lot of times when people leave a cult, and I don't blame them, but they kind of naturally tell their story as if they always knew something was wrong and were always ready to go and 1 foot out the door, and I always knew it was weird or something. No, I was a card carrying, trying to recruit my mom and dad into the cult. Right. I mean, so that's them. They stayed and made this ominous decision to stay when the door was open. And now they're kind of a geriatric group, really. They've got a few young people probably paying their way, but I don't know if they could leave. Some have been in it for 40 years. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Totally get what you're saying. People who, in my group, there were people who grew old. Scientology's been around since 1953, and the C organization, the core group, the real hardcore full-timers, are been around since 1967, and that's a long time. It's decades and decades, and people have died in the C org. They've grown old and died off there. Yeah. And there's a certain point where I kind of, from my position, where I kind of tell people, after a certain age, unless there's really some compelling reason to get them out, there's physical or sexual or financial abuse, really, really harming this person. You're not going to, unless that's the case, intervening is almost a fool's errand, because they're not going to change their mind. They're too set.
You're right. Yeah. It would involve almost having to learn life skills that would be very difficult.
That's right.
At least I know for our group too. Yeah. It's one of the things that there's two main things that I really have been wrong about since I left and studied all of this stuff. And the first one is that in Michael Langoni's book, I think it's in that book where he says, everybody ends up leaving the cult. If you end up including death, I suppose that's true. Right. But I think cult dynamics perhaps have changed, but no, everybody doesn't end up leaving the cult.
That's right. That's right.
It really is the whole life story. And that's better to tell the families and the friends instead of telling them like I used to, oh no, he'll leave sometime, they'll leave sometime. I don't believe that anymore. And then the other thing I was wrong about is I said I used to believe very strongly that marriages that had formed within the cult from cult members usually wouldn't survive, or they would be really rough when they left because, two insulated cult members who don't really act as their true selves, when they leave and the cult thing sheds, who are you and are we going to still be married? And then I ran into more people that are survivors of cults, one near Portland here, who maybe it's the power of compassion or love or something, but no, they're doing great.
Yeah.
I was wrong about that. And it really is a matter of the personal nature of the relationship and of the people involved.
That's right. No, there are very, very few absolute rules when it comes to behavior around cults. There's very, very few, and very few things can you accurately predict, at that level down to the, is the marriage going to stay together or not? It really depends on the people and the circumstances and how long were they married before, how well do they know each other, how well are they staying, et cetera.
Yeah. Are they second generation, multi-generation people?
That's right. So many variables.
There's all kinds of stuff there.
So many variables. But what we can say is that what we can successfully do is we can successfully categorize the kinds of needs that people have when they leave.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And we can sort of offer generalized services or advice or guidance in those areas, right? We can take a subject like trauma and we can go, look, there's a lot to this. Trauma is a big deal. It's in your body. It's a psychological thing. There's, your nervous system is involved in this. There's stuff to learn about it. But really, at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to have to figure out what, if anything, you want to do about your trauma. You're carrying it around. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're not recovered until you deal with it. That's my idea. That's not yours. You got to figure that out for yourself. But I'll tell you got trauma. You come in a cult, that's automatic. Of course you do. Right? Yeah. And here's what it is, and maybe, you figure out what you're going to do about that. Maybe that's a therapist, maybe that's psychoeducation, maybe that's just you learning your triggers and organizing your life so that those triggers don't trigger so often, setting things up. Whatever, right? Whatever you're going to need. And so we know that there's that category of need. But what somebody needs to deal with that is going to be wholly specific to them. That's how I see it. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons, circling back to your SAFE program, this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited and want to support and propagate this model that you've put together. Yeah. Let's say we wanted to do that. Let's say people were listening to this right now and they were like, I could do something like that in my area. Right. I'm not a therapist. I don't have a lot of money. I don't, but I've got social media access and we could meet at the library, right? And I'm willing to facilitate something like that. What would that person do? How would they reach you? Yeah. What would they do?
Thank you. Yeah. Because we just started having this discussion over the last year of wondering, because people have been asking us about what we're doing and could it be done in their town or would we go do it in their town? Yeah. And so we've started a conversation about, what would we want to see happen? And it's important to know that, because really none of us would want to control it. And yet we would want to know that, it was, if it's reflecting us, we would want to know that, I don't know, what we're working through on that.
Absolutely. You want to have people who are going to follow the model.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, and I'm so glad you asked me that. The model, say if we were going to have a Denver safe meetup.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
First of all, I'd probably have to come to the first one.
Okay.
Because I love Denver.
Well, we'll have to arrange that.
Yeah. We would take the train. It would be a whole week. We'd have to take the train to get there. We'd have to stop at Glenwood Springs. I mean, there's so much we would have to do.
Yes.
Okay. So what are we going to do for Denver? Okay. I would create a Facebook site. And I would make up a name. If you want to be safe, be safe. We don't care. But I would put some thought to it.
Yep.
And I don't know, it would kind of be your call if you wanted to just reach out to former Church of Scientology.
Oh, sure. If I were doing it, it would be all cults. That's how I would approach it.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, you're looking great, and you have excellent training. I mean, you can give good information to all cults.
Yeah.
Okay. I would make a Facebook page, and I would post things on it. I would not get into that world. Two things I would avoid. One is I would not get into the world of just reposting crud.
Right.
So-and-so, this big pastor down in, the Bible Belt got caught doing this and that, and can you believe how crappy these people are? Or this guru does that. You need to avoid that, because it feeds something unhealthy to the recovery process. So, but you do have to put some content. So I would make the content some kind of short statements. I might even do a posting every couple days where I explore Lifton or Singer or your own thing or whatever, maybe just to generate some content.
Maybe quotes out of, Take Back Your Life and Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism and, Combating Cult Mind Control by Hassan or, Janja Lalich's books. You could quote extensively from those materials and have 100 memes, or little quote blocks very, very quickly.
I would build that. Yeah. And then I would not put a lot of expense at all into developing the media thing. Yeah. Because really it's really okay to just shotgun it and see where it goes. Yeah. So I would build a nice page like that, and then I would spend the money to send it into the Denver area once I get a few friends on there, followers, like if you did that, you would send to me and to others, hey, here's what I'm doing, and I would like it. And then my followers and friends would receive notification too. Yep. All right. And then I think I would get a point, and this is where you'd really be sticking your neck out a little bit. I would find first thing I would do was I would create an event. Yeah. And you're really sticking your neck out there. I mean, I didn't think anybody would come to what I'm doing when I started this. And as a cult survivor, I thought, no, man, nobody's going to want to come to something I'm doing, But I would start working toward an event, and it would be something like saying, I've got an idea where I'm going with this thing is I'd like to have a meetup, just a very informal meet and greet at blank pub or pizza place or whatever. And would anybody be interested in just getting together and talking about cult stuff, and no rules, no nothing, just be good to see you. And that is pretty powerful, because if you even ended up with just 6 6 people. While you were driving to that event, you would feel the weight of responsibility of, there are 6 people busting out of their crappy cult life here, or recovery, that want to sit with me at a table and talk about this stuff. And so good things start happening then.
Yeah.
And then it just grows from there. So, but once people are invested in it, the beautiful thing about that is that then you have people to bounce ideas off of, and you can say, what would you think if we did this again? How are you feeling about it? And is this a good thing for you or what? And doing it like that, we were really up and running in a matter of months.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's all I would do, and along the way, delegate every possible thing that you can, so that people buy in and bring their gifts and skills to the table. Instead of you being Chris the cult expert, you become Chris the guy that kind of sets things up so we can be together.
Yeah, don't be afraid to use other people and their willingness to help. To help, and that can be hard for some people. They either don't know how to, or they don't want to delegate because I need it to be done right. They have this vision or whatever, and I need it, and I can't trust, and this kind of, and you gotta, with something like this, especially with the kind of this organic sort of no rules kind of thing, is you really got to kind of let go, I think, a little bit, right? And just kind of just kind of be willing to roll with what happens and watch it happen, because whatever is going to happen, it's going to be different from what you probably think is what's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Well, it kind of circles back, Chris, to what you said. An effective overriding value here is treat people opposite of the way their cult did. So if a cult was going to start a meetup, it would be, they would delegate somebody at the door to record names. You'd get a phone call the next day, hey, Chris, it was just really great to see you last night, man. I wonder if we can get a cup of coffee.
That's right. That's right. You're coming next week, right? Right? I can count on you next week, right?
Yeah. And, that's not cool. But to just kind of leave it with the thing of saying, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing here, but I want to try to be a positive part of this thing. And so I'm going to try a couple of these and see what works. You'd be surprised. You'll be in trouble if you don't have any structure. And then you'll be equally in trouble if you put up structural safety rails so that you feel safe. We won't be any alcohol here. We'll make sure we meet there, and we'll only invite these people, and we'll make sure that these people don't come because everybody knows the Scientologists are going to come and take your picture and sue you, or something.
Right. That's right.
There's all kinds of very prejudicial and controlling ways you could do it. But generally people, whatever stripe they are, whatever their background, they resonate with fumbling, bumbling, vulnerable facilitators that are just there because they got a heart for this stuff. I mean, we've had big name people speak and whatnot, and their input, their impact is not much at all. As much as the faces that you see every week who are really cool and nice to you.
Right.
So you're ready, Chris.
Yeah. It sounds like it. I'm going to say that I have given serious consideration to doing something like this locally here, and I figure I should lead by example. So I'm probably going to initiate something like this, but I'm going to need a few months because I have a big project I'm working on right now that I have to have my time on. On that. But I'm putting it out there. I'm saying it. I really am planning on doing something like this because there is a recovering from religion group that meets here in in town. There's a Freedom from Religion Foundation, and there's a recovery group that addresses that sort of thing. And I was going to look into that and see if I needed to become part of that or do something on my own completely separately. I suspect it will probably be the latter. I'll probably want to more follow organically what you've put together. But I was going to do some research on that before I moved forward.
Oh, that sounds...
Because when there's already people doing that work or something like it, you can also just as validly connect up with that and make that part of your work, right? You don't have to, start from scratch to feel like you're doing the right thing. There are people out there who are doing this work already, and it would be beneficial for everybody concerned to find out about that and become part of that,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, having a conversation with somebody who's already doing it is very instructive because you can, like, as I was pursuing this, I realized some other people that were interested in kind of joining the cause here had very strong feelings about who needed to be excluded.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Uh-huh. There it is.
We don't want any homophobic people. They're not allowed. Yeah. White supremacists, they're not allowed.
Yeah.
Proud Boys, they're not allowed. And you can easily form a vibe that you want. And what we tried to do, and this is a value that we have, is we want a meetup that anybody and everybody will show up at. Yep. Nobody will be allowed to recruit anybody, but everybody who wants help is welcomed. And we also, I don't think it's ever happened, but we would love it if a current cult member attended a meeting. I would love it if somebody from an abusive church or Scientology just had this sneaking suspicion that maybe they wouldn't get caught if they just came, maybe they would wear dark glasses and a hat or something and
right.
sit in the corner. But I feel that's an important part of what we do, is that we refuse to we refuse to pre-select who will be there. And this came up in the conference. There was some talk about what if Scientology, which I know at least has a history of some public behaviors that against people, and what if they showed up? And I couldn't really see that happening for a number of reasons. I wasn't myself feeling very strongly about it. I'm not quite sure how they could cause much trouble when there's like 15 different cults being represented.
Exactly. And what are they going to do? Demonstrate outside? I mean, try to make it feel like an unsafe space? Go meet somewhere else. I mean, there are so many solutions to that problem. Because they're there to disrupt and create chaos if they even show up at all. And why would they? Very, very, very. In fact, I can't think of once in the 27 years I was in Scientology that we ever even gave a second thought to support groups and people outside of them.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We weren't even thinking about that,
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So not having that information, we just wondered and thought about it.
Yeah.
And I think in doing these groups, this is why our team has to have a very clear understanding of what we're doing and what we're not doing, so that we can say to everybody, of course you're welcome here.
That's right.
Now, we're a group where we don't all agree with each other. I have friends, very deep people that I love, and I hope they love me, and they think I am a little nutty for believing in this carpenter 2,000 years ago that, rose from the dead. I mean, let's just face it. I believe all kinds of wild, crazy, nutty stuff. And but you can love somebody without understanding or agreeing with them.
Yep.
And so we're very, very clear that, you know, at our meetups, you will not be surrounded by people who agree with you, but you will be surrounded by people that have been hurt like you were and want to be a friend to you. That's it.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
That is a great way to put it. And if there's another, you know, there's subtext here, obviously, right now with our national situation and with the divides that we are all experiencing and very, very worried about. I think people on all ends of the aisle right now are very, very concerned, right? There's a lot of anxiety out there. And this kind of forum is exactly what we need right now, because people need to be able to get along and be okay with disagreeing. We've lost that as a skill, as a social skill. There's manners and etiquette and sort of social lubricant that has worn very thin over the last 10 years. And we need an injection of new oil in there, you know what I mean? And this is the kind of activity that I think at a community level, you know, if we had hundreds of these things, this is exactly the kind of activity that changes those kinds of situations. Yeah, you know, but not even, you know, not even trying. It's like what we're trying to do is just get people to have a safe space where they can kind of come and talk and support one another. That's really, at the end of the day, that's what this is about. And then offering some guidance and some education along the way to help them sort out what the hell just happened to them. But that's it. That's what this is. And if you keep it, you know, politics free and even in a way religion free, you know, you win. You succeed at this, right? How has that? What does that look like? Because I can't imagine that people, you know, haven't shown up and wanted to bring their agenda with them. Yeah. How do you guys deal with that?
Well, that's really a good point. Yeah, the first way is probably not the most important, but it's to be sure that you don't put out any invitation information that suggests an ideological leaning.
Okay. Good. Yep.
So, I wouldn't. Yeah, I would just make sure that there was any messaging that was not exactly just what it is.
Right.
And then what that leads to is being absolutely authentic and honest yourself, and to model that for the group. So for me, people from Christian abuse, they have watched a white public speaker who's comfortable speaking stand up and ruin their life every week. So to come to a meetup and have a white public speaking Christian talk about anything is that's a little thing that I'm always sensitive to about people. So I just make small modifications myself. I don't stand up. I don't set the room up to focus, you know, and I just am careful. And I think the way about the religion is, especially if you're facilitating or leading the group, is to model that. Yeah. Because if you come to our group and a pastor is not religious, you probably aren't going to be too comfortable being the representative Christian in the group, because you've got a pastor there who is not. So we've had people come to the meetup and quote scripture. Because the Bible, as an ancient text, it has many profound things to say about wisdom and foolishness. And I mean, so yeah, but you know, there's a lot of religious books that do, but the Bible has its, and that's triggering. That's hard for people, and I don't know if I've ever spoken to anybody about that, except that our response has immediately let them know this is not something that we're going to get a lot of traction out of.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I don't go, yeah, it's interesting you say that. And as a matter of fact, the Hebrew word actually means that. Absolutely not. I never even comment. I just slide right on by because it's inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And then I'm usually pretty good about it. But there was one time where I was talking about the concept of grace. And as a theological term, grace has a very unique place in Christianity, a Christian would claim. And I was at a point in what I was saying where I had no other way to describe, I think it was dealing with shame or something. I had no other word or way to describe it. And I said that about grace. And I think I qualified it by saying, in my tradition as a Christian, blah, 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 grace or something. And as the words were leaving my mouth, they were turning into bitter poison something. I mean, not that I was being bad, and nobody was, crying or anything. But as I said the words, I knew that I was laying an egg.
Yeah.
So I just kind of blew by it. And then I had lunch with a friend who's not a Christian, not interested in being a Christian. But like I said, nice, good friend of mine. So we were having lunch together or something, or breakfast. And I said, at that meetup, I was making these points. And I used the word grace in one of my points. And I was wondering if you noticed that. And, what did you think about that when I said that? I felt a little weird when I said it. What did you notice it? And she says, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I said, well, sorry, I don't, I know that's not the way, and it didn't really work anyway. And she said, Ken, if you had said that on my first or second visit to a safe meetup, I wouldn't be coming back. But I know you and I love you and you can get away with that, no problem. But if I had felt that the first couple times I came, I would not have been interested, because she came from a kind of a pseudo-Christian type background, and that had been used to hurt her.
That's right.
So very good lesson, kind of a painless lesson learned for me that I really heard.
It's an important one, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this without any hint or intention of animosity in your direction or in the direction of religion at all. I'm serious about that. I very much support religious believers and the right to believe and the desire and the good things that come from belief. But you nailed it when you said it's simply inappropriate in that setting. Yeah. There are too many people, and unfortunately I've run into them. There are too many counselors and therapists out there who bring their religion into the therapy environment, and I mean overtly so. They're leading you to God through the therapeutic process as a psychologist or as a therapist or life coach or various other ways that this is done. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you really want to be careful of that, because when somebody's leading, when somebody has a path or agenda that they're leading you down, you automatically are having your choices limited.
Yes.
Right? And that's the entire model of cults. So, Jan Lalich, right, is binding those choices, putting you on a road and leading you down that path. And that's again, the exact opposite of what you want to do in cult recovery. It's so counterintuitive, because we are so used to being led and thinking that that's necessary for a process of something like recovery. Well, you know more than I do about this. You tell me what to do. And this is one of those times when the actual answer is, no, man, you're the one who has to figure this out. All I can do is show you a few different things that I know about. But at the end of the day, the decisions you have to make on your recovery path are yours to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? No one else can make them for you. And if people are trying to, that's not appropriate. It's just not, really what you want to do. And again, this is tricky because it's not like, you need to learn things. You need to know things. There's stuff you really do want to get your wits around. Yeah, but you got to do it your way, is I think my point, right? There's no 12-step program for this.
No, and that is very well stated, Chris. I'm trying to think if we do give out any kinds of. I guess the only input that I ever really have, if I am suggesting something to somebody, is usually to be a little easier on themselves, and to, if they're of a mind to come to the next meetup too. Yeah. If they're of a mind to, simply because we love to see them, and that's it.
There you go. There you go.
There's I know it's a big thing. You probably heard more about this than I would know, but there's a big theory that value neutrality is an impossibility.
Oh, well, yeah, it pretty much is. Yeah.
There was the movement of saying, okay, and this is when I was going to seminary, it was like, okay, don't impose your values. You can't impose your values. But then I think they kind of came along and said, well, how do you not be, So I've thought about that, especially as a Christian and especially as a Christian leader. How do I, knowing that I have very strong values, how do I protect people from what I do the rest of the week, trying to get people to join my religion?
That's right.
I think it's by telling people, I want to be straight up with you. This is what I believe. And sometimes the only way I want that to come out from me is through kindness and respect for you. But sometimes I might sound a little Christianese or something, or, and if it does, either ignore it or tell me that sounds a little Christian-y or something. I'm cool with that. Yeah. And if you can kind of own that, then I think it serves as a safety net for you when you're talking to people.
That's right.
Like if you're not a religious person, Chris, that's not your value, that's not your belief. You could be in a room full of Christian recovery people and say, okay, I want to tell you where I'm coming from. Like what you just said to me, I've got nothing against faith, and I'm this and this and this. Yep. Just want you to know I respect that. Yeah. But I myself am not there. So sometimes that might eke out a little bit, and I just want you to know that's not on purpose when it does.
That's right. That's right. Because it's all built on, because people know, this is one of those like gut level, a 3-year-old understands this, right? Respect.
Yeah.
It's an attitude. You can feel it in the air, if you will. When somebody respects you, and when somebody's not respecting you. There's a subtext to their communications, or a tone, or a thing that you kind of get or you pick up on. It's not, I know we don't all have the perfect radar for this, but I think generally speaking, humans are pretty tuned into when somebody is looking, down their nose at you versus when somebody considers you an equal or is treating you as an equal. I think it's odd. I think we can pick up on it so quickly. And that's the thing that makes the difference in this environment, is not that we're going to come at it from different belief sets or different backgrounds or different cultures. I mean, our language affects how we think about things. We're going to have differences. There's no way around that. But if we respect one another, that foundation will get you farther than almost any other thing,
You're doing something more. Almost, this kind of comes back to the political divides that you mentioned a minute ago. You're doing something that's more revolutionary than any cult conference that these bigger groups put on, where you sit in a classroom and somebody says, okay, this and that, and then you go to the next one, okay, blah, blah, blah. Yep. we need those things, but they don't operate with a goal of engagement with hurting people. So you're doing something by having a meetup like that, or like we're talking about. You're doing something so counterintuitive to. It's almost like you're undoing the work that the cult leader did to people.
That's exactly it.
You're dismantling it, because some girl comes in there, or some kid or guy, and they have been abused in all of the ways people get abused. And then they show up with you, who's hosting this thing, and you really do prove to legitimately be a person who cares and is kind. That's it. You can get up there and babble and they don't care, because the big thing is happening. So
that's right. I think that's everything, because the simple things are the most powerful when it comes to, psychological change. We have these epiphany moments. We have these moments of of profound insight, or we've all had these things, and they're spontaneous. It's very hard to create. This is actually what cults do, is they create those spontaneous moments and make it look like it was organic and it was the most crafted thing you've ever been involved with, right? So you're trying to do, again, the exact opposite of that. And the only way and it's funny, isn't it? How the only way to do that is to adopt and demonstrate an attitude of kindness, no judgment, no harsh realities, no imposing your will on others. And you think about those things and you go, okay, so if that's the opposite, if that's what I have to do to start dismantling what this cult or what this abusive personality did to this person, look at what they were at the receiving end: judgment, harsh criticism, guidance and rules that they had to follow. Impossible rules to follow, double binds where they were presented with two different things that didn't even make sense. And they had to both be true at the same time, right? Our leader loves us, ultimately, while he's beating us with a stick, right? Like these two things are supposed to be true at the same time, and we were forced to reconcile that and make it make sense. And this is the opposite. We're not trying to force anything down your throat. We're not trying to make anything make sense. We're just here for you. That's it.
Yeah, we're undoing things, that's really, there's something that occurred to me, and this isn't too far off from what we're talking about, but I didn't tell you this, and I just realized this because I've learned it only over the last year in our meetups. There are times when Ashlyn might speak, and it's really important that I am there to facilitate the after discussion. And there are times when I might speak, and it's really important that Ashlyn or Kent is there to do that. Otherwise, I'm acting like the cult leader who my word needed to be received, understood by all, and just shut up and come back next time, right?
Right.
But for me to get done saying what I'm saying, and then to have Kent or Ashlyn say, all right, to the group, okay, Ken's talking about this. Ken, did you mean that when you say it? Okay, well, what about you? And just to be that kind of connector. So I just wanted to bring up the point that I've learned that partnership is so important as a buffer between the organizer or the speaker and the people. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that's a great point. It's a really good point, because you don't want to model or be another guru for people.
Yeah.
And it's and I will say, I'm sure you can relate, that when you deliver information to people and they respond positively to it and start directing their admiration in your direction, it feels great.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it feels wonderful. Yeah, it's a little like, yeah, give me more, right? So so there is temptation there, but being cult survivors, all of us, we also understand at a very deep level. Once you have that experience and you get out, unless you lack insight, and some people unfortunately do, but most people, oh yeah, I ain't ever going all in on anybody again. No, we're not doing that, right? And you don't want people doing that in your direction either. And that's a reality that us ex-cult members have that, sometimes we have to be reminded of, but most of the time it's right there in our face. And I'm never going all in on anybody ever again. I preach that, if you will, because I just don't think 100% commitment is a healthy state of mind for any human being. Frankly, on any topic, always reserve a little bit for yourself to ask those questions,
Yeah, that's really a good point. And when you think about it, thinking of one of Lifton's points, the cult of confession, right? Yeah. The forced confession. The frustration of the totalist organization is that they never can get to that center. You confess, you write a 50-page confession while you're sitting in the Chinese prison, and even as you're handing it to them, there's something you're not telling them that you just thought of, and so the frustration of cults and cult leaders is that they never can get there. So when we're trained by the cult to say, I want you to be 100% all in, that's kind of one of the first lies. You can't do that. The human soul is too complex, and I don't feel it can be owned. And so it's just kind of a false idea anyway.
It's true. It's actually you're actually getting to the underlying truth underneath the truth, because you're absolutely right. You can't commit 100% to something, but we lie to ourselves about this all the time, right? And that's the point, right? We do. I'm 100, because we remember growing up, if you're not, every sports movie ever, if you're not giving 110%, you might as well, if you don't, even you better leave everything on the field. You better be all in. If you're not, then there's why bother? If you're not going to go all in, then why bother going in at all? And this was an attitude that was just layered on us over and over again by, our coaches and our parents and our team leaders. And this gets into the workplace as well with some of the motivational speakers out there and stuff. And they're just, and it's, and the fact is, the truth is that no human being is really capable of that. But what we are capable of is lying to ourselves about it.
Right.
And telling ourselves we're all in, and we must not question, and we must not have any doubts, and we berate ourselves for our doubts and our questions, and we shouldn't. That's the backwards view, the thing that we do to ourselves, when we should be encouraged to ask questions and always reserve a little bit for ourselves, and always be willing to excuse me, always be willing to do that, right? Raise your hand. So I think you're absolutely right. You can't own another soul. You really can't. It's why every system of slavery breaks down over time. It's why every authoritarian system breaks down over time.
Yeah.
Because we won't be controlled.
The language of, your whole soul belongs to this group and all of that. I wonder if that's not really just the language that's being misused to direct your attention away from the fact that you are making increasingly self-destructive actions of commitment to the group, increasingly humiliating yourself, impoverishing yourself, losing valuable good things in your life. So you are train wrecking your life but we don't want to say, well, what we want you to do is get nuttier and nuttier, Ken, to where you are poor, to where you're borrowing money to give me. They never say that. But what we do say is we want a heart commitment here. That's everything you got.
That's right.
I think so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because it plays on our morality. Is what it's really doing, right? We
say
adopt,
more about that.
Yeah, well, we adopt principles in our culture, especially as Americans, with American exceptionalism and the rugged individualism that personifies the American psyche. We raise our children with, and we have an attitude as a nation that you work your ass off, you do your thing, you put in your time, you will succeed, and that if you're not doing that, then you're failing yourself. And cult leaders will build on that. They will take advantage of that principle, right? One of the points of the Code of the Sea Org member, this is a written document from Hubbard. Point one of the code is a being is only as valuable as he can serve others. And that sounds very virtuous to the uneducated ear, to the uncareful ear. That sounds like the life of commitment and sacrifice and discipline. And wow, that's something to be admired. No, it's not. If you go through life thinking you're only as valuable as you can serve others, you are a slave to everybody around you. Yeah, you're a tool, exactly. And your faux virtuosity, the fake virtuousness of that. People can become enamored by that. I did. I martyred myself knowingly for well over 10 years as a Scientologist, knowing I was giving up movies, giving up this, giving up that. Knew I was doing it. And I was like, but this is what I need to do for the cause. And aren't I a good person for doing this? And look at all these people who admire me for the sacrifices I'm making, right? Because I'm serving others. So look at the value that I have. And really, all of that flowery language and virtuosity and building that off of my morality is exactly what you said. It's actually a misdirection. It's a way to make me give more of myself than I ever should have to a cult leader who doesn't care about me at all, but only sees me as a tool to be used and then cast aside. That was L. Ron Hubbard, David Miscavige, right? That's Scientology. That's your guy. That's all these guys. And they make it into a virtue. It's opposite world in the cult. So every bad thing for you is turned into a good thing, and that's where all that language is so crafty. That's where it gets Orwellian, even. Is they convince you that freedom is slavery. Yeah.
Isn't their first tool? I appreciate everything you just said. By the way, thank you for expounding on that. Isn't the first tool a perversion of language? Yeah. Because nobody twisted my arm to, I don't know, you want to go to church, huh? Okay,
That's right.
I'm just going to handcuff you to make sure you show up.
That's right.
But it's a perversion of language, calling something a soul that is actually just an emotional, volitional state as a way that you avoid discomfort. That's right. So you go along with it. They really do screw up the linguistic, the nature of communication. I guess I think that's true in just about every one of these groups.
It is. It is. Yeah. No, because it comes out of that loaded language. They have to train you to think certain ways. There are some key things in any cult that you have to think are true. And the language is mostly modified or invented or bent and shaped to force you to think those ways. And it can be really subtle. It's one of the most powerful manipulative forces on the planet is language. I mean, it's how we accomplish everything. So obviously we're manipulating each other all day long with our language. But when you craft these words to mean something just left of what they really mean, so that you get that little cult angle in there, right? Scientology redefines the word responsibility, a standard English word. Everybody, it's a very heavy word. It has a lot of baggage already. Scientology comes along and twists it so that everything is your responsibility. And it sounds very empowering at first. Oh, look at how powerful I am. But then it gets used. Once you accept it, yes, I am responsible for everything. Oh, really? Okay, good. Now we're going to hold you accountable for everything. Oh, no, wait a minute. Hang on. Right? And suddenly you're at the receiving end of all the blame, shame, and regret of the entire world because you're responsible for everything, aren't you? That
good
kind
point.
Of, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's powerful, and that's why I think Lifton was just having a genius day when he wrote that chapter. Yeah. All right. Well, Ken, we've been talking for a while. We've covered a lot of great territory. Is there anything else about the setup or organization of the SAFE program in any area, or how to reach you, that people should know out there? So after this show, if they want to get something going, they can reach you and do it.
You bet. Safe.org. That's our website.
Safe.org. Okay.
Yeah, when Ashlyn joined us, we started getting more official and adult. So we actually have a website. And or you could just go to Spiritual Abuse Forum for Education on Facebook and message us. And we are absolutely stoked to think that we could help people that want to do this. I've had people interested from Eugene, which is just down the valley from us, about 100 miles, LA. I'm going to count you and say Denver, Vancouver, and South Africa, and Minnesota.
Wow.
That want to know, how would you do something like this? And great. I don't know. I just think, I haven't written it down, so I just kind of was rough drafting it with you, Chris. But I guess why I'm saying this is we're really excited to talk to people about how it might work in their town, and see people try to do something.
Excellent. Well, that's what I want. And so because here's the thing. Here's the reality of this, just to end on this note, right? And not to get all this isn't serious. It's just the facts. There are not enough therapists in this world to treat all the ex-cult members that exist. There are not enough therapeutic services available for all the ex-cult members in the world, much less all the other people who need therapy. If you look at it purely as a numbers operation, there is no way for ex-cult members to all get the full battery of everything that mental health services might be able to offer them for so many reasons, including finances, location, accessibility, understanding, literacy, so many things that barrier getting mental health services. That being said, we need grassroots support systems for ex-cult members. And until we build up networks of these things, people are going to be in areas isolated and alone and not knowing what to do. And this is one of the easiest things to organize and operate. It requires practically no money, very little social media, education. You don't have to build a website to do this. You can use Facebook and you can use, Twitter, and you can organize something and you can get people meeting and talking. And please believe me when I say that is 90% of the work is right there when it comes to recovery. Right? Because there's no substitute for sitting in a room with other people and realizing You've never met these people. You never even heard of the groups they were part of, but you can relate to everything they're saying, you know, everything. And you even know
absolutely.
where it's going, right? Because you have so much common cause on that. And that is catharsis, that's healing, that is growing, and that's what we can do for each other, you know. And then if we want to talk about therapy and therapeutic models and which treatment modalities are best for you and all that, well, we can have that conversation. But this is really where we need to be concentrating our attention these days, I think.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. Yeah.
You bet. Yeah, you bet, man. So thank you for all the work you've done out there. I really appreciate it. And I'm obviously inspired by it, so.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
You bet, man. You bet. All right, folks out there. If you have not, of course, please do subscribe to the podcast and share it, get it out there, do all the things. And if you are looking for any one-on-one assistance or help, you want to contact me, maybe I can assist you with some post-cult situation you're involved in, or you have friends or family who are involved in some kind of coercive situation. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. Reach out to me. Let's figure it out together. So I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.